Mhm.
Hey, I think we're all in. Again, welcome, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Deep breath. We've nearly finished all 3 days. Sometimes I think we save the best for last. We get to hear from the new diplomates. It always amazes me the diversity of their projects. I'm sure most of you are aware, we do both the Diplomate Clinician and the Diplomate Philosopher. But for both groups, they do a project, a written summary or project applying logotherapy. So we get to spend the rest of the afternoon listening to the new ways logotherapy has been utilized in the last 2 years. There are a few diplomates that were not able to attend. Hopefully we will have all of them introduced in one of the upcoming issues of the forum. Probably not the next one, but one for next year. So at this time, I will turn it over to Anne-Marie, and she will be the moderator for the session this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Cindy, and welcome everyone. This is so wonderful to be able to do this. I'm honored to once again chair our Diplomate Colloquium. This started a few years ago at our in-person World Congress. We always had some type of a colloquium or seminar on the last day, and we finally came up with this, I think, brilliant idea to devote this colloquium to the students who had completed or were almost completed their diplomate projects, so they could share them with the audience and the people who were attending the Congress. Because otherwise, unless they were doing an individual presentation, at the most we had their diplomate project in the bookstore for people to browse through. Of course, we don't even have a bookstore now, so it's really wonderful that we can do this on Zoom, and each of them will have an opportunity to share with you what project they chose to complete their studies at our institute. Each student will have about 25 minutes to present, and their supervisor, hopefully, I think they're all here, will introduce each of them. And we are truly an international organization, because if you look at the program, each of our students is from a different country. And I think this really shows the diversity of the people who take our educational program and choose to pursue the diplomate. And we hope that this will spur some of you on to want to do that as well. At the very end of everybody's presentation, we'll open it up for questions, rather than at the end of each individual one. So with that, I'm going to start because my student happens to be first, and I didn't do that because it was my student. It just so happened that alphabetically, Dr. David Sar-Shalom Abadi came first, and he is a wonderful representative of a family physician who practices logotherapy in his work and uses it in his personal life. I have come to know him through the courses he's taught. I have been privileged to teach him, and the topic he has chosen is very dear to his heart. David will maybe give a little introduction, but he is in New Zealand now and recently became a Kiwi, which is, I think, the term for a New Zealand resident, right, David?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
He's originally from Venezuela and has lived in many other countries. And his topic is Being Ourselves, Viktor Frankl's Logotherapy and Philosophy of Life as related to the LGBTQIA+ minority experience. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, David.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. I'm just going to share my screen with all of you. And hopefully you can you can see. So thanks for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name's David Sarshalom, and I am really very honored and proud to be here presenting this project, which is not fully completed, but is there. And so I'll just start with my choice of the title for it, which is Being Ourselves. So it's from a quote from a book of poems. And this line in particular just jumped out at me. And I still try to consider what it means. But hopefully it serves as an introduction to this particular topic, which, as you very well said, Anne-Marie, is very, very dear to me. So just a brief introduction about myself. This is almost 40 years ago. I was born in Venezuela, here in South America, in the city of Caracas. But I do have some roots that go back to many, many places in the world. So I've got family who are originally from Poland, from the Ukraine, from Romania, from Israel, from Syria, from Persia, when Iran used to be Persia, from India. And so I do think that is reflected in quite a lot of my upbringing, which was quite rich in literature, in music, in languages. And I am actually very happy that I get to apply all of these into my work, which I hope you will enjoy. So I studied medicine in Caracas at the Central University, which you can see here in a few photos. And after I got my medical degree, I went to Barcelona in Spain, where I did my specialty in family and community medicine. And since 2015, I've been living in New Zealand, in the very bottom of New Zealand, which is, you can see here at the bottom, this is Mount Cook, and the eighth wonder of the world, Milford Sound in Fiordland, which is about 3 hours away from where I live. And this is the city where I'm at, which is Invercargill. I think my introduction to Dr. Viktor Frankl's life and work came, as with many other people, just quite serendipitously, as I was researching a project suicide prevention workshop for community activity that I was trying to set up. And Man's Search for Meaning came up as a book that I should peruse, and that was 2017. And actually it was Logotherapy in a nutshell, that chapter right at the end, that serves as an very brief introduction to logotherapy, that got me interested in this. And I signed up for the Viktor Frankl Institute of Logotherapy, the first module. And I've been very lucky to have Anne-Marie Neal as my tutor since that very first module, and right up until now. So from that very humble introduction to my first steps in logotherapy and logophilosophy, how did this project in particular come about? Like, how did it come up as a possibility to do this? And so obviously there is a personal component to the choice, my own personal history and my growing up and realizing certain things about myself, but also just some prompts and some gentle nudgings by dear Anne-Marie, who's been edging me to apply logotherapy and logophilosophy into something that will be important to myself. And I think this topic has come up quite a lot throughout the years. But I think a very decisive factor as well has been the current global sociopolitical climate, where we see a lot of initiatives that are quite negative and are looking at rolling back or repealing certain advances that have been made all around the world, although the US always takes a bit of a front stage. So there's also been a lot of, I'll call them logo nudges or logo hints throughout the path. And I think one of the first ones was from the preface to Logotherapy in Action, a book that was edited by Dr. Fabry. And in the preface, Dr. Frankl says that, and I'll just quote, "Not every idea in the many chapters finds my full approval, but the more the views of unorthodox logotherapists deviate from my own, the more justifies is its inclusion in this book, as logotherapy is no fixed set of dogmas, and it's open to its own evolution, to the full development of its own potential." This is in 1979. And actually, in this book, there is a chapter on minorities as well. But at the time, this mostly touched on U.S. ethnic and racial minorities. So I do feel that hopefully this might add to the discussion. There is a very, very interesting article that I came across called Logotherapy for Clinical Practice. It's a 2008 article that has been edited or was developed by Stefan Schulenberg, Dr. Robert Hutzel, Julius Rogina, and Dr. Nassif. And I just want to quote this from the article, which says, "Logotherapy may assist individuals in determining how much importance they wish to place on their own diversity and how to deal with individuals in a larger society whose values may differ markedly from their own. So logotherapy inspires people toward discovering their individuality, their uniqueness, and how to feel comfortable within themselves and within the larger world in which they live. Logotherapy may prove to be one means of stimulating people to respond adaptively to stressors and find a positive voice in the face of oppression." So I don't think you can say it much clearer. I was also quite grateful that actually in that very same paragraph, they do encourage a call to research applied to sexual orientation and gender identity population. So I'm sorry it's taken 15 years from the article to take up the call, but I hope that you will find this a useful addition to the growing literature in logotherapy as well. Another important nudge came from Dr. Fabry, who I'd like to acknowledge as the founder of the Viktor Frankl Institute at the personal behest of Dr. Frankl himself. And in his book, The Pursuit of Meaning, he says this line, which I found quite spur. So occasionally and increasingly, the advice of our conscience contradicts an accepted value. Without a conscience, rules and regulations would be our only guidelines, but rules by their very nature are too rigid and general to fit unique situations. So they tend to suffocate unless we accept them by our own free will, responsibly, not arbitrarily. We can be browbeaten, persuaded, hypnotized, brainwashed, or shamed into honoring our father and mother, but the human way is free choice. And I think certainly the spur to apply logotherapy and logophilosophy to social issues and activism came from Dr. Edith Weisskopf-Joelsen, who in the final unit of the first module of logotherapy said this: "Logotherapy, with all its emphasis on goal, purpose, and dedication, has not inspired socially significant action. It must become socially significant." So I do hope that this is one of the ways that we can actually take logotherapy out into the community. Dalia, a colleague who was just talking about Logotherapy MENA Institute, to take logotherapy out into the wider community at large. With this quote from Viktor Frankl in his book Recollections, I am convinced that in the final analysis, there is no situation that does not contain within it the seed of a meaning. It is my hope to be able to contribute to such understanding through the project by sharing relevant aspects of LGBTQIA history and culture, showing how logotherapy and logophilosophy can help us understand and appreciate the essential contributions of LGBTQIA plus individuals in the past, by showing how logotherapy and logophilosophy can help people from the rainbow community understand their own unique individuality, how it can be a source of meaning and purpose, and hopefully helping to build bridges of connection in a world that appears at times very hostile and unwelcoming. So probably a good place to start is what exactly does the acronym mean? How do we define the subject of this inquiry? Because it can be potentially quite confusing. And so I think in essence, the LGBTQIA plus acronym serves as a very broad umbrella term that allows for a grouping of just a very wide variety of different sexual and romantic orientations, gender identities, and other sex and gender minorities. I have to acknowledge that it's not an exhaustive acronym. It's ever growing, and the plus at the end just indicates that there's many things that you can't just really smush or explain together without turning this into a whole alphabet. There are many criticisms to it, and I don't want to go into this today. I just hope that it'll be a useful and necessary term for giving voice and visibility to minorities that might not otherwise have that option. So as you can see from the acronym, L stands for lesbian, G for gay, B for bisexual, T is usually transgender, but I will discuss these two identities, which are some ethnic indigenous identities, Takatapui Maori New Zealand identity, and two-spirit identities from North America and Canada. Q is usually ascribed to the term queer, which used to be a very insulting term used to degrade and discriminate against LGBTQIA people in the past, but for some people has been repurposed as a term of defiance. I is for intersex, and I will touch briefly on this as it does have quite a medical tinge to it. A for asexual, or people not interested or not particularly attracted to anybody in a romantic or a sexual way. And the plus, again, just an extra that can link in quite a few other identities that by themselves might not have much knowledge in general society. So I think for me, this little genderbread person was quite useful in trying to figure out how to get my head around all these different terms and different identities, because I wasn't aware of quite a few of them. And so to me, an easy place to start, because we can all relate, is the assigned sex at birth. So sex is assigned at birth when birth certificate is filled out and baby is born. We look at the genitals and we automatically classify somebody as either male or female. But you would be surprised to know that about 2% of the world's population cannot very easily be ascribed to either male or female, either because their chromosomes are not two X's or XY. But for example, Turner syndrome, which is a single X chromosome, or Klinefelter syndrome, which is an XXY chromosome. So technically, you wouldn't be able to assign either male or female. And you have to go by visual, by anatomy, by sometimes hormone levels. But again, it's about 2% of the world's population could not be able to fit into this general male-female binary. So intersex is a term that you can come across. Gender identity can match the sex assigned at birth, but for some people it doesn't. And so people who are transgender or gender nonconforming or gender exploring or non-binary might be some terms that you will come across as people whose gender identity is different to the sex they were assigned at birth. And gender expression, as we can see here with the green, is the way that we present this identity out into the world, and it has to do with mannerisms, with the use of makeup, with the choice of games, with play, the choice of work and employment. So all these things are quite separate in terms of society tends to ascribe what things are gender appropriate for male, female, what's masculine, what's feminine. And And finally, sexual and emotional attraction are who we are attracted to and how we relate to that other person or persons throughout our life, which is probably a developing theme in all of our lives. I think it's important to point out that homosexual, bisexual, intersex, and transgender individuals have been present throughout history in most, if not all, cultures and societies. And I would like to highlight a few of these. So in the ancient world, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, so in this very interesting book, so the first masterpiece of world literature that exists in record, written in clay tablets in what used to be Assyria, in cuneiform script about 3,500 to 4,000 years ago. So in this epic, we can read dialogue that Ninsun has with her son Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, when he has a dream of a star falling from heaven. And so the words of Ninsun to her son are, "This star of heaven which descended like a meteor from the sky, I made it for you, a goat and a spur, and you were drawn as though to a woman. This is the strong comrade, the one who brings help to his friend in need. He is the strongest of wild creatures, the stuff of Anu. Born in the grasslands and the wild hills reared him. When you see him, you will be glad. You will love him as a woman, and he will never forsake you." So this is from the Coming of Enkidu chapter in
David,
the
just letting you know you're almost out of time.
Oh, 25 minutes already. I'm sorry about that. So in ancient Greece, this is quite well known, the Socratic dialogue. So Symposium in particular has quite a lot of references to what today would be LGBTQIA plus identities, although at the time completely different names. In the poetry of Persian poetry, the poetry of Hafiz and Rumi, in Pacific Island cultures throughout the whole of the Pacific, in the Maori world, the word takatapui is defined as an intimate companion of the same sex, and they were sent by chiefs to make first contact with European arrivals in the 18th century, as their spiritual knowledge, having insight to ways of thinking beyond male and female, made them better suited to navigate challenging encounters. Native American identities, two spirits, people, a contemporary rendering of an ancient term that signifies the embodiment of both feminine and masculine spirits within one person.
David, I can give you another 7 minutes because I know you still have a lot to present, and we have.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I lost track of time. So contemporary queer identities, as we understand them today, actually have a much closer relation to us, and this intersects with the history and the times of Viktor Frankl and his own experiences, as well, as we'll see. So I will point out the presence of Magnus Hirschfeld, who was a German Jewish doctor who helped pioneer the study of sexuality in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. His work drove him to co-found the Scientific Humanitarian Committee. And in 1919, he founded the Institute for Sexual Sciences in Berlin, an institute that served as a place of education, research, teaching, and refuge, and had, among many things, a priceless library of 20,000 plus books. This was targeted by the Nazis in 1933. It was actually one of the first actions that they carried out, which was the burning of the book of the library and the ban, the exile of Magnus Hirschfeld. And throughout the Third Reich, homosexual and intersex and gender non-conforming people were targeted and identified with the use of a pink triangle as an identifying sign. This is just in Sachsenhausen concentration camp, and the experiences of LGBTQI individuals has been not very much profiled, but it is estimated that between 1933 and 1945, 100,000 people were arrested for homosexuality under paragraph 175. 50,000 were in prisons, 5 to 15,000 were sent to concentration camps. Not many of them survived. And actually, after the Second World War, lots of them were still made to serve out their sentences in prison. It wasn't until this year when LGBTQ victims of Nazi persecution have been publicly commemorated. And the pink triangle, you might come across it as a symbol of defiance and repurposed from such a tragic history. So the purpose of my project will be to apply the basic principles of logotherapy and logophilosophy to this particular population. And just to give you an idea of why this is important, this is a research project from the University of Auckland that was carried out the Youth 2000 study. And in the lower right side, you can see that of the young people interviewed who were same or both sex attracted, they were 4 times more likely to have attempted suicide within the past 12 months. And transgender young people in New Zealand were up to 5 times more likely to have attempted suicide in the last 12 months compared to their cisgender peers. So I do think that applying the principles of logophilosophy, particularly trying to discover sources of creative values in the discovery of meaning, the experiences of love and intimate connection with others, encountering and appreciating nature, culture, arts, beauty, and discovering the creative feats of others who have come before, but particularly attitudinal values, define power of the human spirit, the use of humor, self-transcendence, charity as in Albert Schweitzer's The Good Fortune Obligation, gratefulness, compassion, forgiveness, kindness, imagining and demonstrating other ways of being in the world, and resilience as highlighted by Dr. Southwick and Dr. Charney's work in resilience. So particularly the search for meaning, purpose, growth, the creation of role models, providing a roadmap for people who might not find themselves represented in wider culture, providing social support and optimism. And as Dr. Fabry points out in his guideposts to meaning, self-discovery, knowing thyself and knowing thy neighbor, this face-to-face approach and the uniqueness with which we can ourselves and hopefully encourage others to live authentically their own experiences. So I am optimistic about the future. And I think that some topics appear complicated or controversial, but usually it just means that we're not well acquainted with them. And as logotherapy and logophilosophy stress, every individual is unique, every existence is intrinsically valuable, and gender and sexual minorities have a long and very rich history that spans millennia and multiple cultures. So I'm thankful that we're witnessing more respect, more curiosity, and acceptance about LGBTQIA plus people. There are many challenges yet to face, but just to very quickly wrap up, I would like to conjure up the memory of 2 people who I think embody the principles of logophilosophy, and I hope that you will also find their experiences very illuminating. So the first person is Willem Arendeus, who is a Dutch artist, painter, writer, and a resistance fighter who was born in Amsterdam in 1894. When he was 17, he was I very kindly put left home, but he was kicked out of his house by his parents because he disclosed that he was a homosexual. And he did many things throughout his life, but when the Germans invaded the Netherlands in 1940, he joined the resistance, and his main task was to create false identity papers for Dutch Jews, and his artistic skills were very crucial to the forging of almost 70,000 documents. However, the documents, the registry number could be checked. And so in order to eliminate the possibility of Nazis being able to check this, he was in a group that set fire to the records building in Amsterdam, which destroyed about 800,000 files. So his actions helped save the lives of hundreds, if not thousands of people. But he was eventually arrested and he was executed by firing squad. And I think his final words are quite illuminating in that it is hopefully something that we can keep on the side, that who we are and how we identify has nothing to do with the intrinsic value and the goodness that we can bring into the world. And finally, Alan Turing, whom I'm sure most of you know. So he developed the idea for a universal Turing machine, which is the basis for the first computer. And he is very much associated with the wartime operations that cracked the Enigma code. That was the way that the Nazis used to communicate between themselves. So with this, the Second World War was thankfully won by the Allies. But in 1952, Turing, who was openly gay, was arrested and charged with gross indecency. It was the same criminal charge as Oscar Wilde. He was forced to undergo chemical castration and eventually committed suicide in 1954. So I do hope that with my work, I am able to pour some of my personal meaning to a shared vision of a better future. And I encourage all of you to hopefully do the same as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, David. If you have questions for David, I hope you'll stay till the end when we'll have questions for all of the presenters. And I would like now to ask Dr. Cynthia Wimberly to introduce Dr. Benjamin Aiken.
Yes, and David, thank you. As a side, when I mention workshops, we have a tremendous amount of information and talent among the logotherapists. And I hope someday we provide a platform to be able to hear the rest of your story and slides and so on. Thank you. And now to Ben. Ben and I have had many years we've worked together. I think one of the common threads may be that we have a group of diplomates that seems to have lived many places in the world, and so bring a much more international flavor to some of their work. One of the things I've always said is that Frankl used narrative therapy before we had the term narrative therapy. And so as Ben and I were talking about, and it's like with all of us, there's many different ways we can go with our diplomate. But this was an area that he had worked with and had used very much in his counseling. And so with that, I look forward to hearing what he wishes to share on logotherapy and narrative therapy. Dr. Benjamin Aiken, who did his diplomate in clinical diplomate. Dan?
All right, thank you, Cindy. Thank you, everybody. I have to first apologize. I'm just getting over COVID. So another round, so I may have to pause to cough a bit, but I'm happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Everybody should be able to see that. So I'm coming to you from Vancouver, Canada. I teach in the counseling psychology program here in Vancouver at Adler University, and I'm also in private practice. A little bit of background to ground what I'm going to be presenting is I began my career as a therapist using narrative therapy. And it was around that same time that I was confronted with a significant loss in my life, which became my introduction to logotherapy. And in the years that followed, and as I then moved through my PhD program and moved on to academia, I began incorporating logotherapy more and more into my approach to counseling. So very much in the beginning, a narrative therapist who began to see the world through the lens of logotherapy, and culminating now to very much a logotherapist who uses heavily narrative techniques in my work. What makes this particular work important for me is that as a counselor educator, and a clinical supervisor, I'm very mindful of the risks, if you will, of haphazardly blending or integrating theories without a strong knowledge of the underpinnings that bring them together. So my project for the Diplomate was to interrogate, if you will, through a review of the literature, logotherapy and narrative therapy, and in doing so to create a cohesive, amalgamated approach to psychotherapy that takes into account both philosophies and both modalities of change. In my written project, I have an extensive review of the literature that I'll briefly introduce to you, and in the comparative analysis, looking at the convergent and divergent aspects of logotherapy and narrative therapy, and in the discussion on integration that follows that. So the review of the literature, I won't go into great depths with this, though it does come forward in the discussion that follows. The way I parsed this apart was, for both logotherapy and narrative therapy, I took a close look at the foundational philosophies that undergird both approaches. And in doing so, this takes into account views on determinism versus indeterminism, subjectivity versus objectivity, looked at key concepts, looked at the therapeutic goals, the overarching goals of the approaches and how they differ and how they come together, perspectives on the therapeutic relationship, which includes the role that the therapist assumes in that relationship, the techniques and the interventions used by both, and then the applications, the contributions, and the limitations of both of those approaches. So I'll spend some time talking about the analysis part of this work. I think some of you who might be familiar with narrative, this will make a lot of sense, and if not, there might be some gaps there in what I present. But of course, logotherapy is very much grounded in humanistic existential theory and other approaches to psychotherapy, whereas narrative therapy is solidly grounded in a postmodern a way of looking at the world and looking at experience and looking at what truth is. So here we have, on the one hand, a meaning-centered approach to change versus a narrative-centered approach to change. Excuse me. Logotherapy, Frankl talks about that we're determined, right, to face the unavoidable givens of existence. But our response is not determined. This being the freedom and the responsibility to respond to life or to the demand quality of life, what he referred to as the last of all human freedoms. And while Frankl does put forward the objective or the determined nature of existence, both narrative and logotherapy look at the freedom of the human to derive meaning from that lived experience. Narrative therapy is very much grounded in indeterminism. Frankl talks about humans having this innate need for an objective meaning, which is really the central hypothesis in his book, Man's Search for Ultimate Meaning. And yet human nature and individual interpretation of meaning is entirely subjective within the logotherapeutic approach. Indeed, true for narrative as well. The view is entirely subjective. Point of departure is that meaning in narrative is socially and culturally constructed, the narratives we tell about ourselves and others. There are some nuanced convergent foundational philosophies between the two, both privilege and have a focus on meaning. However, the pathway to that is quite different. Of course, in logotherapy, it's a discovery, a finding of meaning, if you will. And in the narrative approach, it's a construction of meaning through the deconstruction and reconstruction of our narratives. Human agency as well. Individuals are capable of discovering meaning, certainly the logotherapeutic perspective, and in the narrative, humans are able to reshape their own perceptions of reality, and in doing so, identify or create in the narrative language meaning. Holistic well-being, very much grounded in the search for meaning in the logotherapeutic approach versus that reconstructing of narratives. And indeed, both are client-centered in their approach. Some key concepts where we see convergence and divergence, whereas logotherapy highlights the search for meaning, even within suffering, and largely employs retrospective techniques. Now, there are others, de-reflection, for example, but mainly introspective techniques. Narrative, on the other hand, really seeks to deconstruct oppressive narratives and emphasizes language and discourse in doing so. Convergence is the holistic perspective of both on the human experience. The noetic dimension is, of course, additive in the logotherapeutic approach. same on emphasis on values and existential concerns, that individual responsibility to discover meaning and values is very much a part of logotherapy, whereas the reauthoring lived experiences to align with values is part of the narrative tradition. Some divergent concepts are around suffering, that in logotherapy, suffering is an inherent part of life, that suffering can be transformed or transmuted, if you will, into a sense of meaning through the defiant nature of the human spirit, if you will, through the noetic. Whereas in narrative therapy, suffering is seen as the result of oppressive societal and problem-saturated narratives that can be transformed by deconstructing and reauthoring those narratives. Pathology, too, both are strictly non-pathologizing approaches to change. However, in logotherapy, we see that symptoms can be viewed as the result of the existential vacuum or a lack of meaning, a neurogenic neurosis, as Frankl defined that term. Whereas in narrative therapy, symptoms really emerge from oppressive and problematic narratives. Yeah, the person is not the problem, but the problem is the problem within the narrative tradition. Some of the divergent concepts include therapeutic techniques. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. And then the orientation of time in the therapeutic space, that logotherapy leans toward a present and future-oriented perspective, encouraging individuals to find meaning in their goals and their pursuits. Frankl talks about the ontology of time, where the present moment is when potentialities can be actualized into meaningful achievements and then archived, where they're safely stored forever, he writes. Narrative therapy, on the other hand, takes very much a past-focused approach to exploring how past experiences and narratives have shaped one's current identity and how it shapes their problems. And it emphasizes the rewriting in the present moment, those narratives as a way of influencing future outcomes. Therapeutic goals, and I want to be mindful of time, therapeutic goals. In logotherapy, the search for meaning is paramount, right? Emphasizing individual responsibility and resilience, even in the face of suffering. The primary aim in the therapeutic space is to help individuals identify and fulfill their unique purpose in life, their unique meaning, the discovery of existential values, creative values, experiential values, and then, of course, attitudinal values. Whereas in narrative therapy, the goal of therapy is to reconstruct life narratives, to enable folks to redefine their identities and their values. The primary aim in this approach is to facilitate positive change by helping folks deconstruct and reconstruct their life narratives. There's an emphasis on reframing and transcending the influence of the problematic or problem-saturated narrative in that tradition. So we see more similarities than differences in the therapeutic relationship between the two approaches, although the role of the therapist is somewhat different. Convergently, both are humanistic, both are client-centered, and but the relationship is very central to the process of change. Logotherapy emphasizes the importance of genuine and empathic connections. Narrative acknowledges the therapeutic relationship as a collaborative partnership where the client is regarded as an expert of their own lives. Where they're divergent is that logotherapy really positions the therapist as assuming a guiding role, if you will, whereas in narrative, the therapist assumes a complete not knowing stance, which is a takeaway from the postmodern tradition of what is truth and how would the therapist know what that is for the individual. And of course, the role of language and discourse differ between the two approaches, at least the role that language takes in the therapeutic process. Techniques and interventions, the only convergent aspect between the two is that both privilege the relationship as very central as a core therapeutic intervention to facilitate change. Logotherapy, of course, utilizes techniques aimed to clarify values, attitudes, aspirations, the sources of meaning, and to activate the defiant nature of the noetic dimension of the human being. Of course, through Socratic dialogue, de-reflection, paradoxical intention. Others have added to the techniques used in logotherapy through the years. But of course, Frankl had defined the three very specifically in his writings. Narrative, on the other hand, really seeks to deconstruct problematic narratives and reconstruct more preferred narratives, and does so, excuse me, through externalization, deconstruction, identifying unique outcomes, and then reauthoring those narratives, co-reauthoring those narratives with the individual seeking assistance. This takes me to the next chapter of the project, which is really looking at a theoretically congruent approach to bringing these two together. And I underscore that in doing so, and as I walk through this, using the same constructs, the view of human nature and the view of what it means to be human is very much solidly grounded in logotherapeutic ways of seeing the world and seeing what it means to be human, with a bringing in of narrative technique. And there's still some other blendings that have taken place. I also want to underscore that this is a work in progress. It is not empirically validated, though it has, in a certain interesting way for my own process, backed me into the approach that I do use with clients, and in my approach to supervision grounded in psychotherapy theory as well. So the basic philosophy of an integrated model is humanistic existential. The emphasis is on personal meaning discovery and taking responsibility for one's own life while analyzing and reshaping personal narratives, recognizing external factors, and understanding the impact of society and culture as a part of those factors. The aim in this integrated model is to help folks, access the noetic aspect of themselves, that dimension of themselves, to uncover meaning, to find meaning, and to reevaluate and reconstruct the stories that define their identities and their meaning-focused lived experiences. Problem-saturated narratives, very much a narrative term, in this way can be characterized by neurogenic neurosis and or by the existential vacuum, whereas the ideal narrative is grounded in personal meaning. It's grounded in tragic optimism, that is the defiant nature of the human spirit, emerging from the noetic to thrive in spite of. And we can see this point of departure between a problem-saturated narrative that's absent those qualities and an ideal narrative, preferred narrative, that is indeed meaningful for the individual. Continuing with basic philosophies, the narratives that individuals construct do reflect their unique stories. They're imbued with existential meaning and purpose to be excavated through the therapeutic process. Subjectivity is highly valued. There's deep respect for individual subjectivity and the importance of language in shaping one's experiences and identities. And it's very indeterministic. We possess the power to reframe our narratives, to align with our values, to alleviate distress, and to seek and find meaning in our experiences. And that very much is central to this integrated approach. Key concepts bringing the two together: the freedom of will and action orientation, that is emphasizing that individuals can choose their attitudes and their responses to life. That response is the action part of change and choosing what that response is to be, the demand quality of life, if you will, that Frankl writes about. The will to discover meaning, recognizing this as a primary driving force in humans. The existential vacuum and externalization. Here there's a blending of ways of thinking about these two constructs. But in this way, it acknowledges the existential vacuum as a sense of emptiness and meaninglessness, and utilizes externalization, very much a narrative technique, to create distance between the person and their experiences of that existential vacuum, that absence of meaning, and in this way to activate the defiant nature of the spirit, to access the noetic. That is to externalize that experience and to examine it in an externalized sort of way. In the narrative sense, this creates a sense of agency to respond to the problem, that the person isn't the problem is the problem. And that's brought forward from that way of thinking. Values, unique outcomes, and the noetic, these two as well, these also come together. In this way, the aim is to help individuals identify and align with their core values while recognizing unique instances when a problem had less influence, that these indeed are instances that bring light to the noetic dimension, where one might have been able to thrive in spite of the problem, for which they seek assistance. Excuse me. Key concepts continued here. So looking at the constructs or the ideas of neurogenic neurosis and tragic optimism, here we acknowledge that neurogenic neurosis stems from an obstacle to meaning characterized by a problem-saturated narrative. This is the way it would come forward in the therapeutic space, and incorporates the concept of tragic optimism, emphasizing that individuals can find meaning even in suffering, and adversity by reframing experiences, and in doing so, discovering meaning. There is the sociocultural context, and then, of course, the ethics that apply to any approach to psychotherapy. Here we recognize the impact of social, cultural, political contexts on individuals' lives and pathways to meaning, and, of course, the therapist's awareness of themselves in context and cultural sensitivity remain key ethical considerations. Goals of this integrative model really foregrounds the dynamic nature of meaning, of personal responsibility, and the significance of authentic relationships. It is intended to equip individuals with the tools to navigate life's challenges, to thrive with a profound sense of purpose, resilience, and meaning, to empower folks to shape their destinies and construct meaning-centered narratives that align with personal values and aspirations, to address existential dilemmas by reframing perspectives, by fostering acceptance and finding meaning in adversity, to encourage authentic living, to encourage self-transcendence, where folks can focus on benefiting others and society, to deepen their sense of meaning, as well as a unique purpose in life to be realized. And then cultivating preferred identities, recognizing the importance of social connectedness and sociocultural contexts. The therapeutic relationship is the cornerstone of healing in this model, as it is in most, save for some much older models. It's characterized by genuineness, by unconditional positive regard, empathic understanding, respect, trust, and collaboration, supportive, non-judgmental in its stance, and the therapist here acts as a guide, facilitating meaning discovery while honoring the client's expert status of their own lived experiences, that subjective realm. Techniques, I won't spend much time on this, which would be to just explain the techniques, but really to share the blending, if you will, of techniques for the common goal of this integrative model. So bringing forward techniques of both approaches, Socratic dialogue, externalization, paradoxical intention, reauthoring narratives, unique outcomes, de-reflection, mapping the influence, double listening, and then, of course, to be able to personalize an approach to any given set of circumstances and any given client, and to do so in a collaborative sort of way, which means the techniques that come from both schools of thought are not exhaustive, as is true for certainly logotherapy, as Frankl positions that. I go into greater depth in my manuscript on these applications of an integrative approach using logotherapy and narrative therapy. And this is indeed not exhaustive, right? Working with folks dealing with existential crisis of meaning and meaninglessness, coping with crises or loss, mental health and traumas, mental health struggles and traumas, relationship and communications, workplace and career counseling, aging and retirement, life transitions, end-of-life concerns, identity and cultural explorations, personal growth and life coaching, even with couples and family therapy, and indeed, as is true for logotherapy, to serve as a supplement to other therapeutic modalities and approaches. And identifying considerations for the multicultural context of this integrated approach. It is indeed intended to be culturally sensitive, to respect cultural diversity. It integrates spirituality, cultural adaptations as a universal construct, explores cultural values and holistic well-being, promotes self-transcendence and empowerment. There's sensitivity toward intersectionality of narratives and lived experiences. It does incorporate communal and cultural contexts, although a criticism could be that, as is true in some cases for narrative therapy and logo, it is quite individualistically focused, but that is not a strict limitation of this integrative model. And of course, ongoing commitment to cultural competence. Spoke a bit about this, lacking empirical support. This is a work in progress over the past, I first met Cindy, I think it was 6 years ago in Dallas at a conference. And in many ways, this project has been more meaningfully consuming of my time than my doctoral thesis was, and defending that in about the same amount of time. I'm going to quit sharing my screen now. I think I've come in at literally 2 minutes under the gun. And I will pivot that back now to, I guess that's to Jared. Thank you, everybody, and for accommodating my struggle with coughing.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. I'm not Jared, but I'll speak.
Oh,
that's all right. Jared and I are both kind of co-hosting here. I would like Dr. Alice Long to present our next speaker, and I'm going to ask her to pronounce his name correctly, but it's Farid Nafia Al-Sobi, and I am sure I have probably...
Yeah, it's Farid Nafia, yeah.
So, Alice, are you here to introduce your student? You need to unmute. I know I saw you earlier.
I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. And I am only going to say his first name, Farid. That's who we communicate by. I wanted to say about Farid, he is an extremely, what should I say, very committed person to logotherapy. He reminds me a lot of what I used to be, well, what I still am. So excited about logotherapy. And what impressed me about Farid in all of our studies is he was applying logotherapy everywhere, all the time, with children that he was teaching, with people he worked with clinically, with everything that he was doing. And some of the times when we were discussing certain aspects of logotherapy, all of a sudden, something would happen in his life, some circumstance, and it would be the concept that we were looking for. It would be a real life example of whatever we were, the point was in that lesson. So anyway, he's a great learner, and I can't say enough good about him. And also to Reem, she is also in attendance here. She was our interpreter. Although we can converse pretty good in English, she was our interpreter all through it to make sure all the concepts got through. And Farid had to have all of his stuff translated before he could study it, everything. So there was a lot of extra work, but he did wonderful. And I can't say enough good, so let him go.
Thank you so much, Alice. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. How are you? You can hear me? Okay. I have big thank you for Alice. Thank you so much. You helped me a lot. And thank you, my sister Reem. And I have news. I don't know it's good sharing for you or not, but before a few hours, my grandmother is passed away, and I chose tonight share this experience with you. This tough time, but when she lives, she would love when I present these presentations. Actually, 2 years ago, if anyone or any person told me that I would be presenting in English, at a conference, I wouldn't have believed him. When I started my master's thesis, my study focused on the effect of finding meaning to treat anxiety and low self-esteem. The doctor suggested that I look for training program on logotherapy because the research presented in the MENA region on logotherapy, especially the applied aspect, was not reliable. After researching, I enrolled in this institute, and my goal was to really, I'm sorry, Alice, to complete only one program. But my passion towards increased every day. I shared the positive feeling towards my work in the university, Kingdom Abdul Aziz, and give lectures on logotherapy. And everyone asked me, this is logotherapy, really is logotherapy? We don't hear about logotherapy before like this. And today I stand before you to discuss the summary of my diploma project. The Quran, the Holy Quran, God say, you will find with Allah whatever good you send forward for your futures. For that, I chose the name, and I asked Alice about this name. The name like the day they were born. Why I chose this title? Because every year I visit Mecca to serve a volunteer to help those who are performing Hajj. Most of the people who join me are leaders and executives. During this transformative and spiritual day, they always share their work challenges and personal challenge. And I was encourage them to utilize this sacred time to find a way to renew their resolve and plan for a fresh start. Actually, while I was preparing to volunteer like I normally do every year, I had a questions. What if this experience and the process it entails can be extended to their leadership roles? Here is where my program idea began. And on of my main resource in my research and a main pillar in my development program is the Viktor Frankl books and the Holy Quran. I have used the stories about the prophets as a basis to most of my consultation, and I follow their example in daily life experience. This Mr. Jim Clifton, and before that, for example, the Prophet Talut was rejected as a king by his people, Prophet Musa and Prophet Solomon and David, Joseph and Christian and Prophet Muhammad SAW. All of this are example of how these prophets found meaning in their challenge and were able to overcome them. They are so inspiring that I found myself using them as example to build the basis of my program. I have questions, and this question is big question for me. What if the next global crisis is mental health pandemic? Jim Clifton, CEO and owner of Gallup Research, asked these questions. I look this question as a light at the end of the tunnel, and I approach the business community, especially CEOs and C-levels, with this goal in mind. I ask him, what do you need most as a CEO, and what else do you own? The answer was a pleasant surprise. What I have is meaning from this project, and what I need is flexibility to deal with challenges. And in our country, is going through a transformative phase called the 2030 vision. It focused on evolving our current economical and social standard. This put a lot of pressure on C-level executives, especially when they must navigate through the past difficulties such as COVID-19 and the economic crisis. My research name the effectiveness of logotherapy based program in enhancing leadership resilience among C-levels in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And my main research question, to what extent is logotherapy based program effective in enhancing leadership resilience among C-levels executives in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? And a big question about it, sub-research question, what are the current levels, sorry, you can hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you.
What are the current levels of leadership resilience among C-levels in Saudi Arabia? How does the logotherapy-based program impact the psychological well-being, resilience, and stress level? What culture factors within the Saudi Arabia context influence the effectiveness of logotherapy? What are the key elements of the logotherapy-based program that contribute most significance improve leadership? And I take a research objective, examine the current levels of leadership resilience, design the comprehensive logotherapy-based program, execute the logotherapy-based program within a simple group of C-levels, and evaluate the effectiveness of the program in enhancing leadership, and finally, identify the key factors that contribute most significance to improve leadership resilience. Actually, my business model in this program, knowledge, and after that, enhancing the meaning, and after that, living with meaning. And research work procedure is this. Number one, explore study. I have 3 or 4 company now in Saudi Arabia, the huge company. Number 2, selection of the final case. Number 3, pre-measurement. Number 4, improvement, the development program. And number 5, track measurement, and after finally data analyze and summaries. And here I designed a program journey based on logotherapy and customized to our cultures. It contains multiple group and individual sessions, workshop, and activities. And this is my program. Actually, I have here I have case study. Case study. I started the session with the CEO of the company. He was pressured into launching a new strategic plan for the company within 9 months. The team was not focused because of past events, so he wanted to regroup and reconnect the employees towards one goal. He was also facing challenge with the board of executive above him. He felt so pressured. He told me that I'm not happy. I quit after 1 month or 2 months. I don't need this job. And it affected him emotionally and physically. After the assessment, I note that he has a very low resilience. I start the program by explaining to him the basic of what logotherapy is and how the progression of the sessions will be like. Throughout the sessions, I use logotherapy principle and techniques such as um, uh, medicine chest, for example, meaning, triangle, creative experience, attitude, aristocrat method. And during our talk about the session, I note that he used a vertical phrase, I don't have time. So I asked him, what do you mean when you say I don't have time? He said, it means that the project deadline is near. I feel like I cannot complete the project on time, then I will fail. I noted that he said this a lot at work and in his personal life. We explored the deep meaning. Why does he keep saying? We took more until he found the true meaning behind it. He felt emotional when he realized that he feels like he will die at any moment and will regret not completing his mission in life. After watching his serious man break into tears while exploring this profound meaning, our session transformed into something more productive and helpful toward elephant to pressures he felt from his project. Actually, last week we celebrate the launch of his new project successfully. When I say that, you can hear me, everyone?
You've come back on. We can hear you, Fareed.
Okay. When I say that, uh, um, when I see all the CEO in Saudi Arabia, all the people talking about the purpose and the meaning, and we can sharing the meaning in the workplace and the company. Why not? And everyone told me you can't do it. That this is it's a spiritual thing, and the business community don't believe about the spiritual thing. He think about this, and we started this program. Uh, Everyone asked me what does mean logotherapy, and I'm very happy everyone asked me about this. And I ask him all the time. People ask you uh, about your job, your salary, your mission, but don't ask you about what you're built. What are you building? And I told him, if you change your questions, you'll change your life. Sorry about my poor English, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fareed. And I feel it is an honor that you gave your first presentation in English at our colloquium. You did a beautiful job. And on behalf of the members of the committee and board of directors and all of us here, my condolences on the loss of your godmother. And I hope that the memories of time spent with her and about her will bring comfort and peace to you and all of those who knew and loved her. And with that, you're welcome. And with that, and by the way, just think of the immense, I'm just thinking of the immense commitment of someone to take all of Viktor Frankl's writings and have to translate them, the workbook and all, into your own language in order to be able to study and complete these courses with Alice. Okay, well, our next presenter, I'm going to ask Memda to introduce. Memda Osmer, would you please introduce?
With joy, of course. First of all, Hidayet is a wonderful person and an example of a human. I'm not exaggerating. And it was a privilege for me to supervise him on his journey, writing up his thesis. As a bright engineer, 2 decades ago, Hidayet migrated from Turkey to Australia, but he is rather a poet for me, I think, and his poems translated to English won awards. But the word poet does not really describe him. I immediately search from the Google. I come across a word, sculpt. All I wanted to highlight here is the folkloric characteristics in his creations. And in his diplomate thesis, the heading was Logotherapy with Poems and Parables. I think there's a high correlation with Benjamin's work, and Hidayet developed a repository of poems, parables, for logotherapists, for the use of logotherapists, and to be used in logotherapy education. And the repository is not only comprised of only his poems or parables from the folkloric origin he belongs to, but Hasidic stories and Aborigine stories from Australia, very culturally diverse. I'm sure you will love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mendo. It was a really good work. I'm really privileged to work with you. Thank you. First, before I start my presentation, because I'm living in Australia, so acknowledgement of the country. So I'm doing my presentation in the country of the First Nations people of Australia, Kulin Nations. And I pay my respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Okay, my diplomate thesis is meaning-centered poetry and storytelling and proverbs. But I started writing poetry after I migrated to Australia. Before, I was an engineer. I studied mining engineering, did master's degree in mining engineering. But then, once, because I have an interest in reading psychotherapy as well, then one day, I realized that, my former life, it's the value judgments of the former life collapsed. So I'd like to express that with my poem. Because when I write poem in Turkish, I follow traditional Turkish poetry. So in every line, the same, every line, there is rhyming, and in the end, I put my name. So this is the English translation of it. I fell into a strange situation. Those not fallen don't know about it. I began to see all those crazy things. Those who haven't seen don't know about it. I was walking in vain in the world. No words of love within my mouth. I wrote with humanity just only now. Those who haven't written don't know about it. I tore down all the old foundations. I saw 2 paths above me. I began to open the door of my heart. Those who haven't opened don't know about it. Hidayat started on a whole new path and saw the way to the soul. He's asked so many questions to himself. Those who haven't asked don't know about it. So when I started doing logotherapy, I said, yes, I mean, it's those poems are matching with logotherapy a lot. Like in noetic level, we are always free. So when my old foundations collapsed, I start, feeling my noetic level because I knew that I was free there. Then I started searching and my journey started. And, one of the story, when I was doing my thesis by David Gutman, it's telling about why responsibility is so important, because I think our core self always reminds us responsibility and meaning. David Goodman mentions a story in his book titled Finding Meaning in Life at Midlife and Beyond. Martin Buber, famous editor, translator, and essayist, one of the leading philosophers in the 20th century, saw the search in one's heart as the first step in the process of change, leading toward becoming a real human being. In his lovely book, The Way Man According to the Teaching of Hasidism, he tells the story of Rabbi Zalman Shnoyer, a leader in his movement, who jailed because of false accusations by his opponents. One day, the warden asked him, how can we understand that God asked first man Adam, where are you? God, who sees everything, surely knew where Adam was, and thus he shouldn't have asked him at all. Rather than answering this question, the rabbi surprised the warden with an opposing question. Where are you in your world? Look here, you most likely have passed 46 years. And where did they get in your life? When the warden heard that the rabbi mentioned his exact age, he said, hooray! But his heart trembled. The rabbi didn't get into a debate with the warden. He raised his answer to the latter's question to a different and higher plateau by turning it around as if the warden were asked by, where are you? And as the first man preferred to hide rather than answer the question and accept the responsibility for his action, so do many people today prefer to escape this nagging question. Buber emphasizes that the purpose of the question is not only to discover whence one comes, whither one goes, and to whom one will have to answer, as in Hasidic tradition. It's more important to remember that the main purpose of the search is one's heart is to give ourselves the chance to turn away from a certain path that leads to nowhere and go back to the road to the change, which is the point of the story. The purpose of the question, where are you, is to awaken people to the fact of their responsibility for their lives, to prevent from hiding, from giving their personal answers. Buber says that everything depends on how people are able to cope with the question. Every person's heart trembles when she hears the question, but the system of hiding will help people to overcome this feeling, because the voice is not coming via thunder that endangers their lives. It is rather a quiet voice that is easy to draw. So that's, I think, it explained a lot, why what I went through. And also one day, when these are all my personal experiences. Then because every poem and every story touched somewhere in my heart, and transformed me to become a more myself, a better human being. Another poem is A Letter to a Teacher. I am a survivor of a concentration camp. My eyes saw what no man should witness. Gas chambers built by learned engineers. Children poisoned by educated physicians. Infants killed by trained nurses. Women and babies shot and burned by high school and college graduates. So I am suspicious about education. My request is help your students become human. Your efforts must never produce learned monsters, skilled psychopaths, educated Ahmans. Reading, writing, arithmetics is important if they serve to make our children more humane. I mean, those questions ask me, who am I? Like, what Viktor Frankl said, are we reduced to our profession, our religion, our ideology, our gender? We are beyond all of them. Because what Rumi said, there is a garden beyond right doing and wrong doing. I'd like to meet you there. So, and another poem I met, because after I started becoming a carer, I look after elderly people, and I meet so many things. And one day I met an elderly people. They lost their 7-year-old child and the 7-year-old grandchild. And when they showed me the booklet prepared, and I met that poem there. I said, "Wow, that's so powerful." The name of the poem, and also I'd like to share this poem with Farid, who had lost the mother-in-law. Broken Chain. We little knew that day God was going to call your name. In life, we loved you dearly. In death, we do the same. It broke our hearts to lose you. You didn't go alone. For part of us went with you the days God called you home. You left us beautiful memories. Your love is still our guide. And although we cannot see you, you are always at our side. Our family chain is broken, and nothing seems the same. But as God calls us one by one, the chain will link again. And of course, humor. Rabbi Altman and his secretary were sitting in a coffee house in Berlin in 1935. The secretary says, "Herr Altman, I notice you are reading Der Stürmer. I cannot understand why. A Nazi label shit. Are you some kind of masochist or, God forbid, a self-hate Jew?" On the contrary, Frau Abstein, when I used to read Jewish papers, all I learned about pogroms, riots in Palestine, and assimilation in America. But now that I read Der Stürmer, I see so much more, that Jews control all the banks, that we dominate in the arts, that we are on the verge of taking over the entire world, It makes me feel a whole much better. And for meaning of love, there's a mystic that I inspired, Yunus Emre. I read his poems a lot, and those poems inspired me a lot. Hear me out, my dear friends. Love resembles the sun. The heart that feels no love is none other than the stone. Or another one, because I always listen the songs as well, especially in Turkish, and some of them, when they touch, I say, touch to the heart. I said, wow, that's great. Like one of them is a lover tells the other lover, when your hands touch my hands, doesn't matter whether there is separation or death. I mean, it explains the meaning of love so deep. And the other story is Ben Sadok story. Ben Sadok's story is a really good story for meaning of suffering. Ben Sadok, who is a cruel man, he likes making really oppressive things to the human, animals, and plants. One day he goes to an oasis. In that oasis, there is a date palm, which is only 1 year old, and there is a big stone underneath. He thinks to himself, look, I'm going to grab that big stone and put it on the crown of that tree, then that stone will crush it down. Then I'm going to come back a couple of years later to get sadistic satisfaction out of it. Then poor tree tried to get rid of the stone, but couldn't do it because not strong enough. Then he starts thinking, what can I do? What can I do? Then starts sending his roots deep into the soil. Then by chance, he found a big water deposit underneath. Then starts sucking. Then the stem is getting thicker and longer, branches getting thicker, longer. Then in 3 years' time, the tree became the longest and strongest of all trees, date palms, in the oasis. Then 3 years later, Ben Sadok comes back and starts searching for the tree, crushed tree, and the rock, but couldn't find it. And looks around, but couldn't find it. But that tree sees Ben Sadok and bends itself and shows the rock. Look, are you looking for that rock? Thanks for putting on top of me. By the help of that rock, I became the strongest and tallest. And I relate that one of a good short story of Rumi. Rumi says, I saw a man in my dream who is half heaven, half hell. Once he tried to go to his heaven portion, his heaven portion, his hell portion increased. Once he tried to go to his hell portion, his heaven portion increased. So it's up to us. So that's why, once we have the courage to go through our hell, our heaven portion will increase. Another poem by Nasreddin Hoca. Nasreddin Hoca, he lived in a wise man, lived in 13th century in Anatolia, in modern time Turkey. Why lived experience is important. One day he climbs up a roof to his house to repair the tiles. While he was repairing the tiles, then he tripped and he fell from the ground. Then he was in a big agony and pain. Then his neighbors arrived and said, Hoca, how can we help you? How can we help you? Hoca says, oh, my good neighbors, please find me a man who already fallen from a tree, the neighbors are, why? Because he understands what sort of pain I am in now. So that's why in logotherapy, the lived experience matters. So we can, once we share with our, in fact, in logotherapy, we don't call them as a client, but as equal human beings. So we can share our experiences with other human beings. And I'd like to finish with another poem of mine. I'm going to read it in the English translation, then I'm going to sing it in Turkish. Because, that, as I said, I'm from Alevi Bektashi background from Turkey, so which is an oral tradition, and stories and songs and mythology is so important. So it's passed from generation to generation via songs. It's hidden within you. You are the physician, you are the patient. You are the apprentice, you are the craftsman. You are the silent one, you are the voice. All human beings are hidden within you. You are the captain, you are the rudder. You are the ocean, you are the port. You are the pearl, you are the diver. The universe is hidden within you. You are the wave coming up from the deep. You are the proof of the humanity. You are the light, you are the shadow. Every era is hidden within you. Hidayet, you will long be spoken of. Sooner or later, you'll be 6 feet under. You are the traveler, you are the path. The Bible and the Quran are hidden within you. I'm gonna sing it in Turkish now. Hekim sensin, hasta sensin. Çırak sensin, usta sensin. Susan sensin, ses de sensin. Her bir insan sende saklı. Kaptan sensin, dümen sensin. Derya sensin, liman sensin. Gevher sensin, dalan sensin. Bütün evren sende saklı. Dipten gelen dalga sensin. İnsanlığa belge sensin. Işık sensin, gölge sensin. Bütün devran sende saklı. Hidayetim dilde sensin. Evvel ahir salda sensin. Yolcu sensin, yolda sensin. İncil Kur'an sende saklı. Thank you.
Thank you, Hidayat. Thank you. What you all don't know is before the conference started, when we were all getting ready, I asked Hidayat if he wanted to share his screen, and he said, no, I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. And aren't we blessed and privileged that you did? I think I will always remember the rock and the tree. And I take that as a metaphor for no matter what challenges we face, we can always overcome them with what Frankl called the defiant power of the human spirit. Thank you so much for sharing your poetry, Rumi's poetry, and all the poets and short stories that you shared with us today. And I could see your supervisor, Mimo, smiling the whole time you were doing your presentation. So, all right, we have one final, probably the last is the best, I don't know, but Dr. Wimberly, Cynthia Wimberly, is going to introduce her student, Raphael Kleinman.
I take a deep breath because it always amazes me the serendipity of how things come together, and the complexity of each one of us. The engineer that writes poetry and sings, thank you so much. And my student Raphael, whose background is international business, but chose a very creative project for his Diplomate project, and actually wrote a story, a fiction story. And I will leave it with that so that he can explain. But we are a very complex species, the human, with all the different layers. So, Raphael.
Yes, hello, good afternoon, everyone, and good evening, or wherever you are in the world. My project is The Man Who Lost Track of Time. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you can see that. Let me put it on widespread. So again, I'm going to share a little bit more about the creation of a short story based on the principle of logotherapy. But first of all, I want to express my profound appreciation for Dr. Cynthia Wimberly for her guidance and support for this project. So what I'm going to talk about today, a couple of things. One is a little bit introduction about myself, why I selected this project, a little synopsis of the story that I created for this project, some of the logotherapy concepts that I have incorporated in the story, what I learned, and how do I apply it in my own life, and then a conclusion. So first of all, I like to introduce myself. I was originally born and raised in Belgium. I came to the United States when I was about 25 years old, and I was pursuing my master's degree in international business. However, I always was very, very interested in psychology. Really, from an early age, I always was very interested. And I basically attended numerous psychology workshops and was primarily grounded in humanistic ideals. And they were really meaningful experience that I had. And I decided basically to pursue more of a business direction, but it was always a passion in me to continue psychology. So I came to the US, I did my master's program, and I worked at several companies, global companies. I'm in the business area, I'm in procurement, and we have lived in different states in the US, and today we reside in New Jersey. But despite of all of the success and advancements, psychology remained my passion. So I continued to basically take some psychology courses. And one day I was really presented to logotherapy. I attended the conference and someone talked about man's search for meaning. I was really, really interested in that. And if you recall the bookstore Borders back in the 90s, I went directly to the store. The next day, I purchased a book, and it really became my best companion. As it was really instantly interested and wanted to learn more about logotherapy. I purchased another book, Doctor and the Soul, and I was trying to find ways to see how can I learn more about logotherapy. And that's where I found the association, Viktor Frankl Institute. I called it up, and I believe that was Dr. Barnes at the time. And I said, I'm very interested. I'd like to take some classes. And they said, we are offering, educational courses. And if you remember, in the old days, it was by phone. And that's how I basically started my first class back in 2000. And life happens. 2 decades later, birth of 2 daughters, job changes, relocation, and so on. It was in 2021, in the midst of COVID, Corona, I called Dr. Cynthia. And I called her up and I said, you know what, I think I'm ready for this Diplomate program. It was a couple of years ago that I completed the last course, but I said, I think I'm ready. I have some ideas. I'd like to write a story where basically any layperson can understand, read it, and they grab some of those logotherapy concepts. And she was extremely encouraging, and which led me to explore the idea. So I said, you know what? I'll give myself a timeline. We were planning to do a 2 weeks journey to Tennessee and South Carolina with a car. And I said, you know what? It was really a time that I could devote like 2 weeks. If I told her, if I can't come up with anything, then this is not for me. This is not for me, this next step. The reason I present today is that I surprised myself and was able to drive the story. So why the Diplomate Project? Why did I select this project? I've had the really longing to merge my experiences in the business world with my passion for logotherapy in a way which I could give back to society and generations to follow. That was really my drive, my motivation. And also my motivation stems from the belief that it is an approach that can help people with any background to find personal meaning in a personal life as well as in their work life. And especially my observations of people in the business. Day-to-day environment has sort of inspired also the making of this story. And the passion I have for this creative project is sort of rooted in my own journey, what helped me throughout my journey. And I would like to give that back to other people. So it is basically a creative project where I weave in a story where sort of any layperson can easily access to this and really learn some of those nuggets. The story. The story is a fictional story. It has some personal characteristics that resembles my life. My grandfather and father were watchmakers. And as a third generation, I use time as a theme for my story. And I believe time is such an important, because we have a certain time here on this earth, and I'd like to make sure it is productive and I can share some of my knowledge to other people as well. And hopefully they can take that away and do other things as well. So the story aims to evoke a call to action for the reader to find a meaningful life while contributing positively and responsibly to society. The theme of the story: what happens when you finally have everything you ever wanted, but you have never felt worse? A common observation I've made is that in today's world, we focus mainly on the I, me, myself, and I. Everybody's glued on their devices, looking at the device, and the only thing that matters is themselves on a specific goal, or only myself, or material possessions. And it can often seem like people are not grounded in the larger meaning of life and are focusing on trivial matters. I've also encountered many people in the business world who have difficulty disconnecting from their work because they feel that they matter only when they are working. Remember some people that couldn't basically wanted to work weekends, take their laptops. I know someone who took a laptop, they were on vacation, and they were like in the morning working. I understand there's high demands, but they couldn't disconnect. And their self-worth derived from their job. And this single-minded focus keeps them from looking inside themselves. So they want to feel always busy. So that's why they bring the laptop, they bring their work at home, and instead of really decompressing or disconnecting. And that's where I felt the need to sort of write a story that hopefully can appeal to an audience and they can learn something. The story, The Man Who Lost Track of Time. It's a story about a man named Jonathan, who spent his childhood starved of food, attention, and possessions. As he grew up, his craving for comfort and stability drove him to build a tower around himself and shut out everything and everyone who might be a distraction. Now at 50, he's an award-winning lawyer with every material thing he could ever want. He has it all, or so he thinks. So why does he feel so unhappy? When his long-lost childhood friend leaves him with a mysterious gift, a broken pocket watch, he's forced to confront what the true measure of time should really be and what is really important in life. The story brings us along numerous encounters that forces Jonathan to think about what life is asking of us. The picture, as you can see, is the sort of the cover of the story. It's a man, as you can see, that is standing on a watch or a boat. And as you can see, there is water and he's floating on the water. He doesn't know where he's going. However, he sees in the far and distance mountains, and there is a sun shining on the right-hand corner. Hopefully that is sort of trying to portray the story in a picture. I have tried to incorporate concepts of logotherapy into the story. The three dimensions, the psyche, the soma, the body, the spirit, the nous, the three meaning avenues, Jonathan being creative, he's writing stories, and that's where he really feels where his meaning lies. Experiential, he's meeting and has very meaningful encounters with different people along the story. And the attitudinal, there is a character who plays a very critical role in Jonathan's journey, and her attitude towards her suffering. She learned not only to accept her disability, but went further to devote herself to helping others. So that's one of the reasons I try to incorporate that. Other key concepts, such as paradoxical intention, where in the story, Jonathan is confronted. He's in front of him, he has claustrophobia. He has a decision to make. He could enter into the elevator or takes the stairs. And he decides to go into the elevator. He shuts his eyes. He presses first the button, then he shuts his eyes. And then he thinks to himself, I'm going to faint. I can't breathe here anymore. And before he knows, he arrives on the third floor. The other one is dereflection, another concept that I try to sort of weave into the story. His childhood friend, Michael, has a stutter. And Jonathan, his imagination of writing stories, is trying to move away, so bring Michael away from the mockery that he experiences from his classmates to more positive, imaginary stories. So he's trying to de-reflect, trying to bring the person out of this situation and reflect on him from the distance, see that it is only, it's not really the mockery that's important. He has to take himself out the situation. And the last other major concept that I have weaved in is the Socratic dialogue. And there, Jonathan encounters a watchmaker, and the watchmaker during the story has numerous encounters with him and challenges Jonathan to dig deeper and ask him questions and peel somehow the onion to really go to the root of the problem. And then eventually he will find his journey back to meaning. What I learned and how I'm applying it to myself, I believe this, not only the story, but logotherapy in general has given me an opportunity to look at life differently. And two areas I'd like to share with you is, one is sort of self-transcendence or away from myself. When I started my career in business, it's primarily all about what you can do, what, you know, the great things you're trying to work hard, you're trying to give, you know, make sure that you're contributing to the company and get some achievements. It's sort of trying to promote yourself. When you become a leader and you have individuals in your team, it's not about yourself. It's about focusing on others and how to elevate those individuals to basically have a better way to connect with your team members, so that you really not focus on yourself but others and elevating others, and that will not only bring meaning to others, to yourself, and elevate everyone in a more positive way. The other one is creating an authentic relationship, where I believe creating authentic relations are important, even I believe in a work environment where you want to connect and share more profound discussions with individuals, and so it's a more humane environment that you're trying to create. I remember I had an individual who had an hearing impairment, and she wasn't able to, or she was afraid that people would laugh when she was supposed to present. And my interactions with her, encouragement was great, because at the end she really felt more comfortable. A year later, she was presenting on her own, and she was traveling, and she was able to present. So trying to, I think, having of authentic relationship with people to really see who you are as a person. I think, yes, there is maybe the risk that people say, oh, you'll divulge your weakness, but are we not all humans? And I think it's important to show who you are, and I think people will appreciate more who you are, and I think you will have a stronger and productive environment. Conclusion, next steps. I'd like to continue this journey to contribute my knowledge that I have experienced in the business environment and day-to-day environment, and expanding it and sharing with more people. And that's one of the reasons I created the story, and hopefully people can learn something from it. Giving my time to the Institute and sharing if more information, and I'm actually developing some additional information I'd like to share as well with the Institute and with other people. And finally, I'm actually planning to release the story later in 2024. So hopefully, more people can read about it and learn, and hopefully we can spread the word of logotherapy, because I think it's so important and needed today. And I'd like to conclude my presentation today with a Viktor Frankl quote, which I think resonates very much with me and with the story that I've written. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raphael. Thank you for 5 unique and meaningful presentations from our students. What the next portion is for you in the audience to ask questions of the presenters. You can put your question in the chat, and Jared and I will hopefully look at those, or you can raise your hand or simply, I don't know if they're allowed to unmute themselves, Jared, to ask a question.
Yeah,
or raise
absolutely. Yes, they can
So-
unmute themselves.
You can unmute yourself and make sure you let us know who you're directing your question to.
I have a question for Fareed. Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay. Fareed, you had said, by the way, of course, phenomenal presentation. But Fareed, you had said, or you started asking the question, what are you building? And then you said, if you change your question, you will change your life. If you change your question, you will change your life. So now my question for you is, okay, what question are you asking yourself? And the other side of it, has this question changed over the course of your journey doing the diplomate? That's it.
It's a huge question. The first, when I start the diplomate, I ask myself, when you're finished your diplomate. And the journey, I change my questions. What my authority after I go to the past, the life, after the life? What my authority in the life, in my community, and my family, and the big question now the big question after I lost my grandmother, today, I ask myself, what does mean in your life? Okay, and I think this question change when you're suffering or find the love or anything. I'm sorry, my poor question, my poor English, but I my sister is here. If you would like, I speak Arabic and she translate English. I would love like this. His name is Reem.
تفضل. قول.
Hi Reem, how are you?
I'm good. Go ahead.
أول ما بديت الكورس كان السؤال الرئيسي متى أخلص أنا الكورس هذا. بعد
So,
ما
the
بعد
first
ما
question,
بديت
خليني أترجم على الجملة. The first question he asked himself when he started the program was, what do I want to get from this? What's the meaning behind this? Come on.
بعد ما بديت مع أليس وعشنا رحلة طويلة، كان السؤال دائما وأبدا اليومي، إيش الأثر اللي حتركه في الحياة بعد ما أمشي؟
After he started the course with Alice and continued for a while, the question shifted into what am I contributing to my life, and what am I going to leave behind after I die?
الآن أصبح الفكر اللي يحتويني في راسي في السعودية إنه كيف الناس تكتشف المعنى من معاناتها، من الحب، من العمل، من الموت، من الحياة، كل هذه الأشياء.
His message kind of evolved into thinking about the community and our culture. He wants people here to delve deeper into finding meaning in grief, happiness, love, and all these emotions, instead of just going through them.
وأنا أعيش من خلال هذا السؤال الآن.
And he's living through that question as we speak.
I hope you will answer questions.
Thank you very much.
It was excellent. Thank you so very much for sharing. Thank you. And thank you, Ree.
I see we have a question from Ellison Santos. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you all for the beautiful presentations. It was really, really wonderful. I'd like to ask to David. David, I also work with suicide prevention, and one of the populations that we see that have a high rate in suicide is the population LGBTQIA. And my question to you is if you found anything in your research related to the places where the prejudices are bigger. We know that sometimes, like here in Latin America and in Brazil, we have these this prejudice is still very big, and we know that in many parts of the world it's still very big, very huge, unfortunately. And we are here in a very diverse, wonderful Congress with people from many countries, many realities. How can we help these people? And I think your work is a huge and beautiful help, and I thank you very much for that.
Thank you. I agree. I think part of the difficult side of doing this project is obviously having to see. It's nice to see what it's like in the written word, but when you see what's going on around the world and how, yes, I think we all agree here that despite our differences, we should be looking at what connects us. And it doesn't seem like the world is doing that at the moment. It's like we're trying to find what really separates us and focus on those things to try to kind of tear us apart instead of joining us. But to answer your question, I think one of the most reassuring pieces of research that I found is there is a US-based organization called the Trevor Foundation. And the Trevor Group have released a very big survey of, I think, almost 25 or 30,000 people who were surveyed. And out of all the negative statistics, there was one that I'm happy to send that resource out through, is that if, especially around LGBTQ youth, if one person has just one adult who is understanding of their situation, who is encouraging of them to be authentic and to find meaning in their own existence and their own reality, their chances of attempting suicide dropped by 40%. So that's 40%. And the good thing was that one person didn't need to be a parent. It could be obviously a parent, but it could be an uncle, it could be a teacher, it could be a mentor, it could be a doctor or a psychologist. Just that one person has the power of improving their life to the point where they do not contemplate suicide because they know that somebody has got their back in that sense. So I think that might be quite useful to know that we do have that power in our own lives, not just with clients or with patients, but with our family members and our friends as well. I think it's just the kindness and the openness to say, look, I'm sorry that you're going through this, but I will support you. And again, we don't have to agree with how they think or what they're exploring. We don't have to be on board 100%, but just having that safe space can mean the difference between life and death, literally.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
I'm just going down the list, and the next person on the list here is Dita. Dr. Dita, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I actually don't have a question. I'm first of all, I'm so overwhelmed by all the presentations. It is such a blessing, and I'm so glad I chose to stay until this late hours after midnight here. I'm so overwhelmed. And I would just like to relate very shortly to some of the ideas that I heard. And of course, I cannot relate to all of them, but I pinpointed some that really touched me. The first is synchronicity, that I think it is not accidental that, for example, Memdu and Hidayat got together. It is from above. It is not accidental. I've been saying to Memdu all the time that he's a person of heart. And when I heard Hidayat, it's like I felt like brotherhood. I felt like you're a brother in soul to me. I was raised and elevated to a sphere of sacredness by hearing you and your songs and everything. And it is so inspiring. It is incredible. And I think you're absolutely right that the main question in life is, who are you? And, it comes already in the Bible, Adam, where are you? And come out of hiding. And many of us have heard Terea address it so very much. And I think Frankl relates to the fact that when you mentioned Gutmann's book about the second meaning in the second part of life, in Hebrew it is called "Have I Missed the Train?" And you can never miss the train once you really make this change of heart that Buber talked about, like you said, because it is never too late. And Frankl always relates to the story of Ivan Ilyich by Tolstoy, that even on his deathbed, he came to see the light suddenly. And so I don't want to take too much time, but the last thing I would say in what you were saying, in relation to what you were saying about heaven and hell meeting, in our state of terrible war here, a close friend of mine lost his entire family, and he still went to Gaza. Although they were all dead, he still went to Gaza, and he gave a whole speech there. And then a poet took what he spoke and wrote a poem about the meeting of heaven and hell. And in that meeting comes the rising of heaven. And if I get permission, I will send it all to you because it's utterly inspiring. And in the relation to synchronicity, I also wanted to mention that Ali started presenting, what is his name? I'm sorry, I cannot remember all of them. Alice, what is the name of your student that was also talking so beautifully like everybody?
Fareed.
Fareed, yes. So you started saying that every time suddenly something would happen in his life. And that something that would happen in his life would suddenly give us the next step of how we would go further. And then what you're just telling us now, that your grandmother just passed this evening, is again not accidental at all. The synchronicities are part of the ways to discover meaning. And Frankl, he told these two stories about the marble from the synagogue that was ruined, and about the visa, etc. Synchronicity is another way of finding meaning, and so I'm sure that you're presenting today, and in English, and a wonderful English, by the way, is not accidental. And so this is about synchronicity. And perhaps the last thing I wanted to say, if I can find it, about the fact that you can still find meaning even at the last point of your life, is that it reminded me of what that you talked about Buber. I come back to you, Hidayat, that Buber also talks about the turn of heart, the complete turn of heart, and you mentioned something like that. And it reminded me of Plato in the parable of the cave, that he says, just like the man who has released himself from the chains, he has to turn his whole body. And just like that, a man has to turn his whole soul in order to come from darkness to light. So I don't want to take more time, and thank you all for marvelous, marvelous presentations. And next time, Hidayat, I'm going to take your position to not mind about technology, because me as a philosopher, I always say the philosophers are the last dinosaurs with technology, but I was convinced to do it. But next time I will just be myself, because you being yourself have touched my heart so much. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Dita, for your sharing and for being willing to stay such a late hour from where you're living. And I see Clara Martinez. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Clara.
Hello, hello, hello. Hola, hola a todos. Estoy muy emocionada porque este espacio me conectó con sentimientos, con emociones, con recuerdos, con vivencias, con lo que nos une a todos realmente. Entonces me conmovió mucho todos los trabajos prolijos, creativos, vívidos. Quería como hacer ese comentario, como ese despertar de la conciencia estética. A mí me gusta mucho escribir, entonces me llamó la atención esa conexión de lo espiritual con la escritura, poemas, textos. Y le tengo una pregunta, por favor, a Rafael. En lo que estás escribiendo sobre el hombre que perdió la noción del tiempo, si haces alguna diferencia entre el tiempo como cronos y el tiempo como kairos, o no haces ninguna diferencia respecto a esa vivencia del tiempo. Muchas gracias a todos. Gracias.
And unmute. Gracias. Gracias to you, Clara. Gracias. John Federico. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Well, we've only known each other for 20 years, Anne Marie. It's
I know. That's why I'm embarrassed.
You're fine. Perfect. First, the Diplomate projects just get better and better every year. Kudos to the five of you. Thank you so much. I have a question for David. Are your slides part of your written project, David?
They weren't originally, but I have made the slides available. I'm really sorry that I had to just gallop through some of them. I really hope to be able to kind of give a bit of a sense of time, so that when we got to what the project was as such, it was grounded on some kind of historicity and just that it's not just a random thing that came into my head, but it actually has some deep roots that go back hundreds or thousands of years. But I am happy to make the slides available. I did upload them to the hub, and I don't know how people can get them. I know it's still a work in progress, but there is going to be a lot more in the project as such. So this is a bit of an outline. And I am happy for people to and take home. Yeah.
I'll look forward to those. Follow-up question for Cindy. Cindy, how do we access the Diplomate projects from the archives?
Oh, another very deep breath. That's a project that we need to work on. I need to get with Minda. My goal is to have, like we have the forum available, that we would have all of the Diplomate projects. I have a big stack over here of those that were done pre-internet typing, though, thing that needs to be scanned. But if someone would like to assist with that project, I am more than willing to share. But it's been on my list for a number of years, so that we would have access to all the Diplomate projects. And right now it's not beyond just, I'd like to do it. I will say, though, for any of these that have done their projects, like with the other diplomates, we're moving more and more into I hope, a workshop Marianne is on here. She's going to do the trial run for us after the first of the year to do some workshops. But speaking for myself, I always need CEs. Any of us in the mental health field will need those. And if we can develop those, and I think, David, yours would be a wonderful topic to be able to provide information and maybe even moving into some of the things like you were talking about, interventions. But I'm just going to kind of say again, it's a volunteer organization. Memda, Jared, Nancy, and Sabine and I are going to take a little time off after this. So we're not volunteering to do anything for a little while, but after we catch our breath, would love to hear from some of you if you want to assist. And I'll see if Jared and Memda and Nancy give me a thumbs up on that.
John, to answer your question about the slides, they are, I see David's slides. If you navigate back to how you clicked into this room, there's a tab that says resources, and they're right there.
All right. Thank you, Jared. Thank you all.
I want to apologize. Clara actually had a question, and I apologize. I don't speak Spanish, but David, I think, David, did you understand the question? I believe it was a question for Raphael. And if someone, again, could please, if you could help us out here and ask Raphael the question that Clara asked.
I think Clara's written it in the text, but yeah, it was whether Raphael was considering both Chronos time and Kairos time as consideration for his short story, whether they were integrated or just focusing on one or the other.
Raphael, could you comment on that, please?
Sure. It was mostly a time in general. The idea was really it's more time from perspective that we are here only a limited time on Earth, and we want to make sure that we take the maximum opportunity to contribute and do something with your time here on Earth. Basically, that's sort of the idea behind the time that I had sort of weaved into the story. I'm not sure if it fully answered your question, but that was mostly the symbolism of time that I used in the story.
However, I'm going to add a little bit as a supervisor. There are a little bit of mysteries that as he writes. And so I think it is possible to interpret part of it. Raphael, you wrote it. I'm not trying to overstep, but beyond just chronological time, some of the things as I would read it, there's a little bit of a mystery there with the timekeeper and the watchmaker.
Correct. So I think it's more the deep time, like was mentioned, the Kairos time. So I think that's mostly the element. So to the exact question, the Chronos time is, yes, there is a timeline that we follow. Actually, it's the whole story starts with Jonathan, and I may have not captured that in my presentation, but Jonathan starts with a nightmare at the beginning of his story, and he basically shouts, "Help, save me." And he is basically encountering this nightmare. And throughout sort of the chronological time, you see the nightmare coming down, and at the end, sort of he has a dream. But there is also the Kairos, the more deep time that is more important to everybody, is weaved in as well. So it's a chronological time, yes, from a story perspective, but then also the deeper question about why we're here and what are we actually providing or contributing to society.
Once it is available, Raphael will be in touch, but once it is available, we will post it on the webpage, and so you will have information when it is actually published and available for others.
Yes.
We still have time if anyone else has a question for any of the 5 presenters or comment.
Thank you very much, Rafael.
I wanted to make a comment. David, I know that you had a lot more to present and you ran out of time. And so I hope that we will get a workshop out of you. Cindy, thank you for nudging him in that direction. I wanted to mention something that was so profound to me when you were going over this piece of work that you chose and you started sharing with me the history that goes back thousands of years of prejudice and discrimination based on sexual orientation. And I was struck because Viktor Frankl, of course, was in the concentration camps in World War II, lost his family in World War II. And what was the turning point of World War II? And I always knew about the Turing, that Alan Turing had decoded the encryption of the German Enigma machine, which actually most people feel was what was the turning point in World War II. And not only that, he's considered the founder of the modern computer, and the basis, Turing test was the basis for artificial intelligence. And think about all the amazing things that happened because this man lived and died. And his parents, he was rejected by his parents, and yet he continued to do something good in the world. And sad to say, because there was still so much misunderstanding and prejudice against sexual orientation, he was forced to have this castration, this chemical castration. And talking about suicide, which was brought up by the other questioner, what's the suicide rate in terms of this population? He ends up committing suicide several years after that. It is just a sad commentary on what Frankl calls the decent versus the indecent man. And we just need to keep encouraging all of us to be that decent person that Frankl believed we are all capable of being. So I want to thank you for that, David, for sharing the history, not just of Alan Turing, but of the man who saved so many lives in Denmark and risked his own life and ultimately was executed. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was, I think, probably one of the hardest part. I think I broke down crying when I showed it to you the first time. And I think just reading that final exclamation to the world, where you still at the end, even though you've done heroic things and helped others, not out of self-interest, but just out of self-transcendence, really, of doing something that goes beyond you as an individual, but how can I help others, even if I don't know them personally, and to still at the end have to appeal to humanity because of something that might be different in you. It really broke my heart. And in the slides, you will find the mention of a small documentary, a Channel 4 British documentary that's hosted by Stephen Fry on Willem Arendeus and Frida Belafonte on this situation, which I highly recommend. If you can watch it, it's about 8 minutes long. But yes, I think that hopefully one of the things I would love to contribute to is that despite what we think we know about a certain population, and I did mention it could just be any minority, that we don't take our prejudices as the guiding force, but that we actually comfortable effort of our comfort zone and maybe just meeting each other in the middle and finding out what things really are like for somebody. Because again, what we think we know about someone because we assume that we know might not be the reality, and that is part of our growth journey as well.
David, Nancy Lozano, last question.
Yes, I had a question. The first is congratulations on the presentation, was wonderful. But it's a question to Benjamin. Your presentation and your work is very important, and I would like to remark, because for our position in this approach, we are in Viktor Frankl, we need more publications. Are you publicate this work?
I would like to, and I think I will, yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. It's important. That is to remark, because in our work, we need to really extend out scientific work. Congratulations, Benjamin. This, and thank you very much for that work. And yes, it's that. I'm so happy we are so connecting, and our topic was great connection and bridge. And so from London, here is late. I feel a little tired, but so enjoyed. I will miss all this preparation, and I see wonderful Congress, and congratulations and well done for everybody.
Thank you, Nancy. Charles, you have a question or a comment?
Dr. Reagan has an article that will be appearing in the upcoming proceedings of Logotherapy and Existential Analysis. And I would invite all of you diplomates to submit an article write-up of your Diplomate project or the work that you're doing to the International Forum for Logotherapy. And I think they would welcome your input and your participation and the fresh ideas that you bring to the table. So we need everyone's voice, not just the people that are used to writing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles, for reminding us of that. Yes, our International Forum for Logotherapy, we are always looking for articles. Rodney Dicer is the editor. He's doing an excellent job of getting that journal out for all of us. And if you're a members of the Institute, the journal is free. It's included in your membership. Even if you're not a member, by the way, you can go on our website and get all the journals through 2009 without charge. And all the other journals, I believe, are $5 each. But I urge everyone to be a member so you can get them without having to pay anything at all. So are there any other questions or any other comments before we just close this wonderful conference, this wonderful World Congress?
David.
Go ahead. Was it someone, Cindy? I do have something else I was going to do, but go ahead.
Well, David had something. He had his hand.
Oh, David, you have your hand up.
But that's all good. Please, Dita. I'll hold till the end.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, first you go.
No, David, go ahead right now.
I wanted to thank everyone who was presenting today in this session with me as well. I didn't know any of you before today, and it was a real pleasure really just to share this time with all of you. There was, I think, just like you, Dita, I found that Hidayat's presentation was quite touching, and I was very pleased that he brought up Rumi, and I also brought a poem by Hafiz or Hafez, which I didn't have time to post, so I did wonder if we had just 1 minute for you to have a read of that particular poem from the 14th century. So I'll just share my screen really quickly, if that's all right.
Yes, please.
So I'll just put it up, and hopefully you can enjoy that.
Why don't you read it to us, David?
So it happens all the time in heaven, and someday it will begin to happen again on earth, that men and women who are married, and men who are lovers, and women who give each other light, often will get down on their knees, and while so tenderly holding their lover's hand, with tears in their eyes, will sincerely speak, saying, "My dear, how can I be more loving to you? How can I be more kind?"
Thank you so much.
So this is highly recommend if you can find this book. It's called The Subject Tonight is Love. Yes, 60 Wild and Sweet Poems by Hafiz, the 14th century Persian poet, and Rumi's as well. So the Essential Roomie, which I highly recommend as well.
Thank you. Before Dr. Wimberly, Cindy closes. Oh, go ahead, Dita. You have another comment?
Yeah, well, it's not a comment. It's just two technical things. One is that I was going to ask to inform myself whether I have not filled up the survey of any of the lectures, and I want to ask if it's still possible after the lectures for all the participants to still fill the survey up.
Absolutely. Thank
yeah.
you for I didn't ask you to do this, but thank you for asking the question, because yes, you can go back, just go back to the page where you click to join the session, and you should be able to fill out the survey there. And I would encourage you to please do that. There's also a survey for the Congress overall.
That's right.
You can access that on the homepage. We'll also be sending out an email in the next couple of days that'll link directly to that survey. We welcome and would love to hear your feedback on the World Congress. So thank you for asking that question, Dita.
Yeah. And maybe if you're happy with my question, maybe you can send an email to all the participants to fill up the survey of the lectures, even though they have passed already the lectures, because I think many of them did not fill up the survey. Perhaps you can remind them.
It is already written and scheduled to be sent. So
yeah, okay.
So yes,
Great.
that will be going out soon.
Okay, great. So I'm glad I asked that question. And my other thing is rather a suggestion, and I'm going to challenge you, my dear friend Anne-Marie, that last time you had the courage and because we are a whole family, family connected by hearts, you had the courage to finish this after party by singing, and you did it in dedication of Dr. Barnes. So I challenge you to do that again, and we will all join you. And thank you again for a wonderful conference.
Well, Dina,
I second that.
John Vitorino has already kind of done that. So that was going to pluck up my courage and sing. And honestly, I was told when I was a little girl to just mouth the words when I was practicing for a recital. So you're going to have to bear with me. I do not have the beautiful singing
Before
voice.
you do that, though, I'm going to talk, and then you can close us out.
No, you did it marvelously last time. And when I told you that, you said how great that it succeeded. So that's why I decided to challenge you again.
Okay. Cindy, do you want to talk first, and then I'll do my...
Yes, I do. I'm not going to follow that. Yes.
Be my guest.
I know we're tired. I know it's the end of 3 days, but I just want to say to you that are still here after 3 long days, thank you. And one thing I forgot to mention, Julius, for you that know Julius, he did send an email this morning, late last night. He has been sick, and that was why he was not able to attend. So I did want to share that he is thinking of us and still involved and knew that we were meeting. And if the topic was building bridges of connection, I think the challenge for the future is, after connecting, building those tents that are large enough to include everyone, all of the decent people, regardless of race, creed, and any other way we can divide. The decent people must come together to be able to have a voice. So thank you. And we do want you to fill out those surveys. It will help us in planning 2 years from now,
which will be our 25th World Congress, which I'm going to call our Silver Jubilee Congress, 25th World Congress 2 years from now. All right, I have been challenged to do this, and I'm just going to give a little background quickly to those of you who don't know why. When we did this Congress in person, Dr. Robert Barnes, who we lost sadly 2 years ago, our president for many years, he always had on Saturday night a Texas barbecue and line dance, and we would do skits and sing and all kinds of things. And I had the courage to sing this particular song at one of them. And then a couple of years later, I started singing it instead at our friendship breakfast, which was the last event on Sunday of the conference. And Dr. Barnes loved it so much that he was always asking me to continue doing it. And I did it virtually 2 years ago in honor of Dr. Barnes. And I did promise that I would do it again every 2 years. And John already, and now you, Dita, have reminded me of that. So it is a song that Bing Crosby sung to children in a movie called Going My Way. I'm going to sing it, and if you're muted and you sing along, great. Even if you're not muted, sing along when you hear the chorus. It goes like this.
Even out of tune.
Would you like to swing on a star, carry moonbeams home in a jar, or be better off than you are? Or would you rather be a mule? A mule is an animal with long, funny ears. He kicks up at anything he hears. His back is brawny, but his brain is weak. He's just plain stupid with a stubborn streak. But by the way, if you hate to go to school, you may grow up to be a mule. Or would you like to swing on a star, carry moonbeams home in a jar, and be better off than you are? Or would you rather be a fish? A fish won't do anything but swim in a brook. He can't write his name or read a book. To fool the people is his only thought. And though he's slippery, he still gets caught. But if that sort of life is what you wish, you may grow up to be a fish. Or would you like to swing on a star, carry moonbeams home in a jar, and be better off than you are? Or would you rather be a pig? A pig is an animal with dirt on his face. His shoes are a terrible disgrace. He has no manners when he eats his food. He's just plain lazy and extremely rude. But if that sort of life is what you dig, you may grow up to be a pig. And all the monkeys are not in the zoo, 'cause every day we meet quite a few. So you see, it's all up to you and me and we and us. We can be better than we are. We could be swinging on a star. Happy rest of the day, everyone. Thank you all for a beautiful, wonderful World Congress. I look forward to seeing you all in 2 years, which I'm sure I will be required to sing again. Thank you for the 5 presenters. I'm so proud of every single one of you. Fantastic way to end the World Congress.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Anne Marie.
You're welcome, Charles.
And thank you, presenters.